In this podcast, you'll learn how to identify and speak about singular and plural nouns, including the tricky ones that many English learners sometimes make mistakes with. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you, Craig?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's really strange because this time of year I'm used to escaping the heat and maybe going somewhere for the summer where it's a bit cooler and fewer tourists. But this time I'm staying in Valencia. I'm working through the summer. I'm doing the conversation groups online. If you're interested in improving your conversation, send me an email, get in touch, craig@inglespodcast.com, and I'm really enjoying these small groups of students who just want to speak better English. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. Yeah, I'm putting up with the humid, hot weather here, but it's nice to be off work, and it's nice to have lots of time to be able to record podcasts. And what about you, listeners? You're all welcome, particularly if you're a new listener, but all the old timers are very welcome too. What are you up to? Get in touch. Let us know. We'd be interested to know how you are spending these summer months.
Actually, somebody did get in touch with us with some very, very good news, and that's Anna from Mallorca.
Hi, Rosa and Craig. How are you? Since I started listening to your podcast 4 years ago, I've been waiting for the moment to tell you that after 3 failed attempts, I finally passed the C1 level exam at the EOI in Palma de Mallorca. I want to thank you both for your invaluable help and wisdom about the English language. Without you, it would have been impossible to achieve my goal. I also want to thank my English teacher Lynn, an intelligent and charming woman who taught me, among other things, how to write in English. Thank you.
Fantastic news, Anna. I know you worked so hard to get through that exam. Congratulations, you deserve it. And we've studied together in the past, and you mentioned Lynn as well. I'm really pleased that she helped you and that we've been useful to you as well to get to your goal. So fantastic. Well done.
Yes, congratulations, Anna. That's very good news. I think you said in your message that you had failed a few times before you eventually passed. Is that right? You're a good example of the old saying in English, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And you did, and you passed. I need to take a leaf out of your book. I need to copy you because I just heard about a week ago that for the second time, I failed C1. Not English. My English is pretty good, I like to think. Sometimes it's debatable, I know. My C1 Valencia, or as you might say, Anna, Mallorquí, because it's pretty much the same thing. Valencia, Mallorquí, similar language spoken in Mallorca as to Valencia. So I do know about failure, specifically a failure in C1 exams, because I failed my C1 twice now. So I really do empathize with you. I admire your determination, and I'm going to try and copy you and see if I can't eventually pass my C1 in Valencia.
So you're going to take a leaf out of Anna's book and try again next year? Yeah,
yes.
Good. Next, we have a voice message from Andres from Colombia, who has contacted us because he wanted to practice a cleft sentence. What's a cleft sentence? You have to go and listen to episode 472 that we did describing cleft sentences and how to use them, inglespodcast.com/472. And here's Andres with his cleft sentence.
Hey, Craig and Reza. Practicing cleft sentences. Just one for the moment. This was the best podcast that I have ever listened to it.
Thank you, Andres, for sending in your sentence. And we just listened to it. And I think we can improve it, can't we, Reza? It's not exactly a cleft sentence.
No, let me see if I got this right, Andres. You said, this is the best podcast that I have ever listened to it. Well, the first thing is the word it at the end is wrong. Take that away. So your sentence should be, this is the best podcast that I have ever listened to. That's a good sentence. But it isn't a cleft sentence, actually. It's just a sentence with a relative clause. Craig, can you think of any way that we could make it a cleft sentence?
Well, as we mentioned in episode 472, a cleft sentence has kind of two parts. It's cleft or divided in the middle. So something like, it is the last podcast that was the best one I've ever listened to is a cleft sentence. We're emphasizing the last podcast. Again, it is the last podcast that was the best one I've ever listened to.
But thanks for your message, Andres. We're very pleased to have it. And keep practicing, please.
Why don't you try again? Go back and listen to episode 472 and send us another one. So let's focus on the main topic of today's podcast, and that is talking about singular and plural nouns. Now, usually to make singular nouns plural in English, we add an S or an ES. For example, you might have a car, one car. Well, if you have two cars. I think you know that. If you have a podcast and you listen to several, then you're listening to several podcasts. And that's quite difficult sometimes, especially if you're a Spanish speaker, that consonant cluster at the end, that STS, podcasts. You're playing with your tongue and your teeth there, podcasts. What happens when we add an ES, Reza? There's something happening with the syllables, isn't there?
Yes, if you have a word which already ends in an S, for example, a glass, well, if you have two, that's two glasses. GLASSES. Some of you might go to a class, but you might also go to more than one class. You might go to 2 or 3 or 4 classes.
Also with words ending in Z or the Z sound. If you win a competition, you might get a prize. If you win several competitions, then you've won prizes.
So those were some examples of regular plural words in English. You simply add S or ES. That's the majority. Like in many other languages, by the way. Like in French, for example. Or Spanish, add an S or an ES as well. For most words. But you know what I'm going to say now. I have to ruin it by saying there are irregular plural nouns. Of course there are. There are always going to be an exception or two. So there are irregular plural nouns, and you probably already know some of them by now. You should. Let's see. I'll say the singular, and let's see if you know the plural. And then Craig's going to tell you the right answer.
So try and say the plural before me.
Man.
Men.
Woman.
Women.
Person.
People. Now, did anybody say persons? Because that is okay, but only in extremely formal and certain situations. You may have gone into a lift, or if you're an American speaker, an elevator, and you see a notice on the wall, maximum 5 persons. So you're thinking, well, persons is the plural of person. Well, no, actually people is a lot more common. We use persons in formal English, maybe in a contract, a legal document, but for everyday English, the plural of person, people. There are many people on the beach.
Here's one more. Child.
Children. Now, this might sound basic, but many students of English, including students at advanced level, sometimes forget and make mistakes with these plurals. So men, women, people, children, make sure that you're saying the correct plural.
So those were really basic words that you absolutely have to know. They're very important words, but there are hundreds of irregular plural nouns. Here are some of the more common ones. Obviously, we can't do every single word in English because we wouldn't have time and it would be pretty boring as well.
We'd be having a very late lunch, wouldn't we?
Yes. And you wouldn't remember all the information, and it's just not necessary. So here are the more common ones. Let's start off with a group of words which end in the letter F or FE. So shall we do the same? I'll say the singular and you try to say the plural before Craig tells you the right answer.
Go for it.
Knife.
Knives.
Life.
Lives.
Wife.
Wives.
Calf.
Calves.
Leaf.
Leaves. Now, if you don't know, a calf is a baby cow, so one calf and many calves, and leaves on trees to turn over a new leaf, to make a change in your life. Turn over a new leaf and the plural leaves. All of these words can be found in the show notes. Go to inglespodcast.com/478. Let's look at words or nouns now ending in O, the letter O. So we usually make words ending in O plural by adding ES. For example, well, I'll say the singular Reza, you say the plural. Notice where Reza is stressing these words. Where is the stressed syllable? Potato.
Potatoes.
Tomato.
Tomatoes. Or tomatoes in American English.
Or potato. Hero.
Heroes.
Torpedo.
Torpedoes.
So middle syllable. Tomatoes, potatoes, torpedoes. Isn't a torpedo a sandwich in the US?
Yes, I think I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Although for me, the more common meaning is a type of bomb, which is fired by a submarine, isn't it? Underwater.
Yeah, an underwater missile, a torpedo. Now, there are exceptions, particularly when words have been taken from other languages, because as everybody knows, the British like to steal things from other countries and languages and put them in museums or use them when they're speaking. So here are some examples of that. Pianos. So piano, an Italian word, isn't it, originally? Piano, yep. Pianos. Photos. Logos. Companies and businesses have logos. Kilos, weight in kilos. And zeros, more than one zero, zeros.
So those were words which never have an E before the S. They just end OS. They're the exception. And then there's a group of words where both spellings are accepted. So the plural could end OS or OES. They're both accepted. Like the plural of mosquito, mosquitoes. Yes, we stole that word from Spanish. Thanks very much. So you can write it the Spanish way in the plural, OS, or if you want, equally correct, you can write OES at the end. It's also correct.
Is there anything you hate more than mosquitoes?
Not much more, to be honest. I hate mosquitoes with a passion, I have to tell you.
What do you hate more, mosquitoes or cockroaches?
Mosquitoes. Yeah, at least cockroaches don't bite you, you know.
There's another word where you pronounce the S at the end with an extra syllable. Cockroach, cockroaches, cockroaches. Yeah, they're horrible. Volcanoes is another word that can be spelled with an E, so OES or OS. And again, the stress is in the middle, on the middle syllable. Volcano, volcanoes.
Another one is tornadoes. It can be spelled with OS at the end or OES. Both spellings are accepted.
And moving on to another area of irregular plurals and nouns that change vowels. So the vowel changes depending on if the word is singular or plural. So the double O, the two O's might change to a double E, or an AN might change to an EN. Let's look at some examples. 1 foot, 2.
Feet,
Very good. 1 tooth, 2.
teeth,
1 goose, 2.
geese,
And if you're thinking, what's a goose? It's a water bird. It's a bit like a duck, but I think the neck is longer and the bill is shorter. That's not the bill you pay in a restaurant. That's the the bill that the duck or goose has on its mouth. 1 man
2 men,
and 1 woman.
2 women. Be very careful with the pronunciation of women, because although the first syllable doesn't change as regards spelling, WOM, the pronunciation changes. So it looks the same, but actually it's pronounced differently. So 1 woman, 2 women. And it's such an incredibly important word, and it really is frustrating to hear people with a supposedly high level of English mispronouncing that word. Get it right. It's a very important word. 1 woman, 2 women. Let's move on to another group, irregular nouns with a big change. For a variety of different historical reasons, some words change substantially, rather a lot, when they become plural. For example, everybody probably knows the word mouse, like Mickey Mouse. But do you remember that the plural of mouse is?
Mice. 1 mouse, 2 mice. There's a mouse in the house. There are mice in the house.
I tell you what, we'll do what we did before. I'll say the singular, and let's see if you can say the plural before Craig tells you the right answer. Die.
You want me to die?
That wasn't the verb to die. That was the noun die, which may be a new word for many people. A die is one of those little cubes which has a different number from 1 to 6 on each side, and you roll it, you throw it down, and it will land and reveal a number from 1 to 6. So one of those is called a die.
And it is spelled the same way as the verb, D-I-E, but the plural is dice, D-I-C-E. So roll the dice. Also a popular game in casinos, dice.
Ox.
Oxen. Now an ox is like a cow, isn't it? A male cow.
Yeah, and a big one. Yeah, I think in Spanish it's buey.
Oxen. And a couple we had before, child
Children.
and person.
People.
And finally, to do with money, penny. So 1 penny.
Pence is the plural. So for example, if you have exactly half of £1, you have 50 pence.
And there's another plural you may hear, and that's pennies, P-E-N-N-I-E-S. So pennies, pounds and pennies. There are some irregular nouns that don't change at all when you make them plural, and they're identical. And many of these are names of animals. For example, sheep. Don't make the mistake of putting an S on sheep. We don't usually do it. There is a sheep over there, or there are many sheep in the field. So sheep doesn't usually change.
Yes, they're mostly animals. Another one is fish. 1 fish or 2 fish. However, the word fishes, it does exist, but you won't hear it much in modern English.
Deer is another one. That's D-E-E-R, not D-E-A-R. D-E-E-R, that's an animal like Bambi. Bambi was a baby deer, and deer does not change either. So 1 deer, many deer.
Our next animal is a moose or 2 moose in the plural. That's an animal which kind of looks a bit like a deer, but it's much bigger, and you'll find it in North America, in the United States and Canada.
Where you might also see buffalo, and buffaloes also exists, although you can use the ES on the end of buffaloes. And I think if you agree, Reza, you can say 6 buffalo or 6 buffaloes. I don't think it really matters. Both are acceptable.
Yeah. And the same goes for our last animal, shrimp. So you can say 1 shrimp or 2 or 50 shrimp. But if you like, you can put an S on. You could say 2 shrimps. But it's more common not to add an S.
Here's an example with the word deer. I've seen several deer when walking in the woods near here. That's strange, isn't it? Deer near here, the same sound, ear. I've seen several deer when walking in the woods near here.
Here's another example. I could say to a fisherman, how many shrimp did you catch? But I could also say how many shrimps, but shrimp is more common as the plural.
Shrimp cocktail usually has more than 1 shrimp in it. Aircraft, watercraft, hovercraft, and spacecraft, all of those compound nouns with craft, they are the same whether singular or plural. For example, we can say the new aircraft was tested by an experienced pilot this morning, or the airline has a fleet of 50 aircraft. So it doesn't matter if you're talking singular or plural. All those words with craft can be used for both aircraft, watercraft, hovercraft, and spacecraft.
Craig, did you know that NASA has made several different types of spacecraft in their 59-year history?
I did, although it all seems to be privatized these days. I think space travel has been privatized, and the NASA are outsourcing different types of spacecraft.
Yeah. It's not something I'm going to lose any sleep over. Just like traveling to the bottom of the ocean seems to be privatized, but it doesn't always pan out that well. I'm not particularly jealous. So.
What does pan out mean?
Pan out means to eventually end in a certain way. I can't say I'm particularly jealous of people venturing to the bottom of the sea or to space. It doesn't always work out that well.
No, it doesn't. There are accidents.
I'm not that jealous, to be honest. I think I might just go to the Canary Islands for my next holiday, not so far away.
If I had that much money, I'd spend it differently. Now, speaking of plurals, we can look at the roots of words from Latin and Greek, because we do use a lot of words on a regular basis, especially in mathematical and scientific contexts, that we take from Latin or Greek. And many of these words, they do keep their Latin or Greek plurals when we're talking about maths and science. And some of them also have anglicized plural forms. That's forms that have been made more English, that have come into common use. Can you think of any, Reza?
Well, let's start with nouns ending in US. So the US is the singular form, and to make it plural, it changes to an I. Although many of the plural words ending in I also have anglicized versions by simply adding ES. I tell you what, we'll do what we did before. I'll read out the singular, and then let's see if you can get the plural before Craig tells you the right answer.
Some of these sound strange to me. I want to say that before we start. I don't think I would use them, but I suppose if you're an expert in physics or maths or science, you probably would be using these a lot.
Here's the first one. Focus.
Foci, or you could also say focuses.
Radius.
Radii, with 2 eyes. Or you could also say radiuses, although that sounds a bit clumsy, a bit unnatural. Radiuses.
Fungus.
Fungi. Do you want to hear a joke?
Go ahead.
Why is the mushroom always invited to parties?
Because he's a fungi?
He's a fun guy to be with.
I saw it coming, yeah.
Why did the fungi Leave the party.
I don't know.
There wasn't much room.
I like the second one better.
Much room, mushroom. Nothing like an explained joke. Carry on.
Next one, nucleus.
Nuclei.
The next one, our listeners in Mexico, as well as a few other countries, will certainly be familiar with. Cactus.
Cacti. Do you notice the pattern here? The eyes, nuclei, cacti.
Alumnus.
So one alumnus. Several alumni.
What is an alumnus and what are alumni?
Students.
But not like in your class that you do online, for example, at the minute. You wouldn't call them alumnus, would you?
No. Is it people who only study Latin? It's just used formally in some colleges and universities. You might see that tend to be very posh, very kind of snobby universities and colleges that are really, really expensive, perhaps, and they sound more intellectual and more clever if they say alumni instead of students.
Yeah, for me that's true. But I would say a more common use, though, is for an ex-student. Another common use is to say someone is an alumnus, or plural, they are alumni, for people who used to go to a place. So, for example, the ex-students of a certain school might be called the alumni. There might be an alumni association, even. So it also has the meaning of an ex-student. Okay, the next one is octopus.
Well, you could say octopuses or octopi, using that I suffix to make it plural. Octopi.
And the last one is hippopotamus.
Hippopotami or hippopotamuses, although that's not easy to say. Hippopotamuses got about 6 syllables. Hippopotamuses.
They were words ending in US from Latin. Here now we've got some words ending in IS. But something different happens. When the singular ends in IS, the plural requires changing the IS to an ES. But also the pronunciation changes. Let's do what we did before. Let's see if you can get the word before Craig tells you the plural. An axis.
Axes. By the way, AXES is also the plural of axe, which is a tool you use to cut down a tree, but the pronunciation is not the same. So axes is the plural of axe, the tool, and axes is the plural of axis.
Singular. Analysis.
Analyses.
Crisis.
Crises.
Thesis.
Theses.
Yeah, make sure you pronounce that one well. You don't want to say feces. You want to say theses.
Yeah, feces is shit, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Sounds pretty similar. What you say in Spanish, heces, in English is feces. We didn't say that. We don't use such terrible language. We
No.
were talking about the plural of like an academic thesis to academic theses.
Let's look at irregular nouns ending in ON and how we form those plurals. Now, these Greek words change their ending, their ON ending, to an A or an A. For example, phenomenon,
Phenomena.
criterion.
Criteria. By the way, you might be surprised at the number of native English speakers who say criteria as singular incorrectly. But you do hear people say, this is the most important criteria of all the criteria. But they're wrong. They should say, this is the most important criterion of all the criteria. So native English speakers get it wrong as well. But, you know, better to get it right, isn't it? Particularly if you're going to do an exam, because they won't let you off in an exam.
So an example of the plural of criterion, entry to this university is based on the criteria published in the prospectus. So criteria there, more than one criterion. Can you think of an example with the other one, phenomenon?
Yeah, here's the plural of that. El niño And I'm using an English word, not a Spanish word. El Niño, we've stolen it from you. Thanks very much. We're talking about a specific climate phenomenon. El Niño and the Gulf Stream are two phenomena which affect our climate.
Looking at Latin now, irregular formation of nouns ending in um, which is from Latin. So they're changing the ending, these words, from to a or a. For example, bacterium is the singular noun, bacterium.
Bacteria is the plural.
Datum.
Data.
Yeah, that's unusual because I looked at that word and think, I don't remember seeing or hearing datum for a long, long time. Most people these days use data for the singular, don't they?
Virtually everybody is using data as a singular, except academics. I've been doing some translation recently for somebody who works at the university, and they have quite correctly used the word datum. They talk about specific individual datum. So it's a type of word that has been, let's say, limited these days to things like academic journals. Yeah, but you won't hear it used in everyday English. But it is the correct singular form if you want to use it.
I would say the same for bacterium as well. I think scientists and biologists would probably use bacterium very often, but the everyday person on the street would probably say there's a bacteria instead of bacterium. And data I often hear as an uncountable noun. So I hear the expression a piece of data. It's due to a bad piece of data. So they're using that as an uncountable noun.
You know me, I can be a bit old-fashioned, a bit of a purist about these.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that.
I don't really mind if somebody says data as singular plural, but I'm not so easy with bacteria as a singular. It's clearly not, because you can isolate a bacterium. For me, it doesn't take an awful lot of scientific understanding to realize one bacterium. So yeah, data, sure, because as you say, it's nearly always used in an uncountable way. There's a lot of data. Okay. But I would be a bit stricter about bacterium and bacteria myself. But I totally agree with what you say. Many people are using it as a plural, but I'm not so happy about it.
Well, let's see how you feel about the next one, because we are communicating to you using the medium of podcasting. What's the plural of medium?
Media. Now, I'm sure there's not a single listener who hasn't heard the word media, but I bet you haven't all heard the word medium.
Only as small, medium, and large.
Yeah, perhaps in that sense. But the singular of media is medium, however, like data, which can also be pronounced data, by the way, if you prefer. Data, both pronunciations are accepted. People are using the word media like data as a singular these days. For example, people might say the media is really tough on pop stars. So they've clearly decided it's singular. The media is really tough.
But that's more like the news media, and news as well is an uncountable noun. So maybe that's by association with news. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, could be.
Just speculating.
But there is one particular use where you absolutely must use the word medium and you can't use the word media. And Craig, you used it as your example. Can you repeat your example?
The medium of podcasting or the medium of video.
You can't say there the media of podcasting.
No.
So you do need to know the word medium in the sense of a vehicle for something. It is medium. You can't say media there. We couldn't say the media of podcasting. No, it doesn't work. It's got to be the medium. And also a person who can speak with the dead is a medium.
So if you have two people who can speak with the dead, is that a media?
No, good question. They're two mediums. Aha!
Interesting.
And two mediums, by the way, don't make a large size either.
Very good.
So a person who can speak with the dead is a medium. And if you happen to meet two of them, they're two mediums.
Now, the next one, if you're a teacher, if you work in education, you probably know this one. Curriculum is the singular noun. What's the plural?
I would accept happily either curricula or curriculums. Have you any preference?
Curricula would be my... Yeah, curriculums. Yeah, I've heard it. I think of it as a mistake, although if you're saying it's acceptable, where did you get that from? Is that from a dictionary or that's your thought?
Well, I checked it on a dictionary. I prefer curricula for the very simple reason that I studied Latin at school, so I have a soft spot for getting it right. It's as simple as that. But I'm happy if people say curriculums, but I like to hanker back. That means think fondly of my days studying Latin at school, so I like to say curricula.
Go back to the days when Latin was spoken.
Well, I'm not that old. My teacher wasn't a centurion.
Speaking of Romans, stadium is the singular word, a football stadium. You've heard that before. And the plural is?
Technically, stadia, but these days we easily accept stadiums. Have you any preference?
Stadiums, I think, would be my choice there. Isn't it strange how we like or dislike words? I'm quite happy to accept stadiums as the plural, but when you say curriculums, something inside me goes, no. Very strange.
Let's study that. Maybe there's a good reason for that, because when you're talking about curricula, it's automatically then you're thinking in a more academic way. It's something to do with education.
Maybe.
So you want to get it right. Whereas a football stadium, it's sport. It's not really academic. So who cares if you say stadiums? You know what I mean? Maybe it's to do with the use of the word. If it's associated with academic things, then you want to do it the Latin way. But if it's not, you don't really care if you do it the Latin way.
I think this is how language tends to evolve. The more you're exposed to a certain way of saying things, the better it sounds to you, the more comfortable, the more accessible. I didn't study Latin or Greek at school. I learned a little as I started being a teacher, but because I work in education, then I'm so used to hearing, or I have been used to hearing curricula as the plural, that feels comfortable to me, whereas curriculums doesn't. So maybe it's the words you tend to be around that make you choose one or the other. But you've probably had a memo if you work in an office. People send you memos. What's memo short for, Reza?
Well, memo is the singular and it's the short form of memorandum. So, Craig, what's the plural form of memorandum?
Two possibilities again. You can have memoranda ending in A, memoranda, or memorandums with the MS ending. Both are acceptable. Do you have a preference?
I prefer memoranda just because of getting the Latin grammar right. It just satisfies me since my teacher insisted all those years ago. I only studied Latin for a couple of years, but it's made a big impression on me.
Yeah. Let's look at some examples with the words we've looked at. Scientists have discovered a completely new type of bacterium. Singular.
Would you be happy there if somebody said bacteria? See, we're talking about that.
No.
Because new type of bacteria. There are people who would say it, but I don't like it.
What about this? You should wash your hands to get rid of bacteria.
Yeah, clearly, because you're talking about the lots of bacteria you have there. You're not talking about one particular type, right? So that's where I say there is a slight difference, no?
What do you prefer with this sentence? The data was added to the computer or the data were added to the computer?
There, I really don't mind either way. They both sound okay to me. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, 100%.
What about this one? The media is always looking, or the media are always looking for a juicy scandal.
I would say either or either. Both. Yeah. You?
I prefer are, but I'll accept is from people. I'm happy enough.
And one more. As he's completely deaf, he can't communicate through the medium of sound.
There's no ambiguity there. It can't be media, can it? No.
No.
Because it's one particular vehicle of communication. It's definitely not a plural.
And as we said before, podcasting is an audio medium, and that means that you can practice your English by sending us a voice message and appearing on the medium of podcasting on our podcast. So do you have an idea for a future podcast? We hope you found this focus on singular and plural nouns useful. We'd love to hear from you for some future ideas. You can reach us by voice, record a voice message on speakpipe.com, speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast, and we will include your voice message in a future show.
If you prefer to write, you could send an email with a comment or question to craig@inglespodcast.com or me, belfastreza@gmail.com.
And we remind you that this podcast is sponsored in part by mansioningles.com. If you're looking for a paid course, visit the online store. Go to store.mansioningles.net, and there you'll find a selection of courses that you can use for self-study.
As always, we'd like to say a big thank you to all of you who help us by supporting the podcast through the Patreon scheme. That's Patreon, Patreon. You can have a look at the show notes. There's a link there to patreon.com/Inglespodcast. If you follow that link, you might like to support us through a donation of as little as $1.50 per month. As a way of saying thank you for that donation, we will give you instant access to recent audio transcriptions. As I said, there's a link in the show notes if you'd like to do that.
We keep saying recent transcriptions, but they actually go back years. We don't have every single episode of the 478 transcribed, but we've got probably 70-80% of them transcribed. So not only recent transcriptions, you get access to almost all of the back catalogue transcribed. And we don't have time to thank all of you individually who are on this program, but we would like to welcome and say thank you to our latest Patreon supporters who have joined us this month, and they are Ángel Abaladejo Pérez, Tanawat Sankthanakul, thank you very much, Paul, Carlos Ezquerdo, and Luisa del Valle Arias, who has recently increased her support. So thank you very much, Luisa, and to everybody who is helping us to continue with this podcast.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends. Craig, what will we be listening to in next week's episode?
We're not sure yet, but we do promise you we will have a podcast next Sunday for you. So until then, thank you for listening this week. Have a great week. It's goodbye from me.
And it's bye-bye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.